All right, good morning. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth series. We're glad you're joining us this morning. If you want to know more about our ministry, go online to womensbiblestudy.com. There you can learn everything you want to know about our ministry. We started this Encouraging Truth series because we want to have something for you on Monday morning to encourage you through the rest of the week. So this is why. We live in a time right now where there's so much just division and confusion and sickness, and we just don't feel secure anywhere. Because of COVID, we say, like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And then if you're a parent, you're like, well, what if we're shut down again? And then my kids are home for another 3-6 months. Like, that's just so difficult for parents. And then we look at the news and we go, well, we don't even know who's telling us the truth. Like, should I wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? If I get it, do I quarantine for 14 days or 10 days? And with all the craziness, then we're like, well, what about the stock market? And what if my parents get sick? And what if our taxes get raised? And then we just kind of jump on what I call the what if train. And we ride it until we're so anxious that we just want to jump off. We feel a little bit like this. As a hurricane quickly approached a small coastal town, people hurried to a town shelter. They were huddled together in the dark with the winds howling and the rain just pouring down. And everyone huddled. Their eyes were fixed on the door because they knew if it was blown off, everyone would be sucked out of the shelter by the hurricane. The town's elderly pastor stood up and he began to pray with great oratorical effects. Crying out as he prayed, he said, Lord, send us the spirit of the children of Israel, the spirit of the children of Moses, the spirit of the children of the promised land. An old man, not as polished and certainly not as direct, cried out in prayer and said, Lord, don't send nobody, just come yourself. This ain't no job for children. So today I want to encourage you with this thought. Encouraging Truth number 36 says this: God is your shelter. It's not the shelter where the hurricane is, even though that's much needed, but God is our shelter. So before we actually talk about what a shelter is, I want to talk about God. And I want us to understand that God is so incredibly big that when we say God is our shelter, that just makes all the difference in the world for everything for us. James Merritt wrote he talks about a book Robert Wells wrote entitled, Is the Blue Whale the Biggest Thing There Is? So it's a children's book and it's trying to help the kids just see how big our universe is. So he goes on and he says that the largest animal on the earth is a blue whale. Just the flippers on his tail is bigger than most animals are on the earth. But the blue whale isn't anywhere as big as, let's say, a mountain. If you could put 100 blue whales inside of a huge jar, you could put millions of those jars of whales inside a hollowed out Mount Everest. But Mount Everest isn't anywhere near as big as the earth. If you stack 100 Mount Everests on top of one another, it would be just like a whisker on the face of the earth. The earth isn't anywhere as big as the sun. You could fit 1 million Earths inside the sun. But the sun isn't anywhere as big as the red supergiant star called Antares. You could fit 50 million of our suns into Antares. But Antares isn't anywhere near as big as the Milky Way galaxy. Billions of stars, including superstars like Antares, makes up the Milky Way galaxy. But the Milky Way galaxy isn't anywhere near as big as the universe. There are billions of other galaxies in the universe, yet filled with billions of galaxies, the universe is almost totally empty. The distances between one galaxy to another is beyond human calculation. Yet we're told in this psalm that we're about ready to read that you and I are in the shelter of the one who created it all. See, I think the bigger God gets and we start realizing how powerful and mighty just by what he's created, then we can go, you know what? When I come under his shelter, I'm safe. And that's a really good feeling. You and I can come under the shelter of a really powerful God who can do anything. Like this, for instance, there was a Norwegian missionary, Marie Monsen, served in China in the 1950s. She testified to the intervention of angels when they were in great danger. They had taken refuge in this mission compound only to be surrounded by bad guys, and they wanted to get to these missionaries. But suddenly these bad guys just left. And the missionaries didn't understand why, but a few days later, someone said, the reason why is they were getting ready to break down the flimsy wall between them and the missionaries when they noticed really tall soldiers with shining faces on a high roof in the compound. The looters, the bad guys, left. Marie Monsen wrote this: the looters saw the angels in the form of men, but they were invisible to us. See, I want you to think about this God. He sends angels, if need be. He raised people from the dead. He stopped raging storms with just one word. He parted the Red Sea. He parted the Jordan so people could walk through. He gave sight to the blind. He made the lame to walk. This is the God that is our shelter. So let's talk about what a shelter is. A shelter is a small building or a covered place that protects people from bad weather or danger. We're watching this older show right now on TV. It's called Wild at Heart. And it's about a family who went to Africa just to release a monkey or something. And when they got there, they were like, oh my gosh, we love this place. And so they moved there and started a wildlife preserve. One day they're outside, all the kids are outside playing and whatever, and these lions show up. And the reason why is they're looking for food. There's not enough food on the preserve for these animals to eat. And so they're looking for anyone, people included, I guess. But it was terrifying. You see these big lions running towards these people. But you know what they did? They were in danger and they ran into the house for shelter, for protection. And that shelter kept them from being eaten by lions. So with that background, the psalm we're going to work through is this. Psalm 91, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. All right, so let's talk about Psalms for a minute. We came out with this Bible reading plan journal, and the reason why I'm telling you this is not like as a commercial, but it kind of, I guess we could make it a commercial. These come in brown, dark pink, and light pink, and it makes a really good Christmas present, and I'm telling you that. But the cool part about the journals is that there's no days attached to it. You don't have to start it on January 1st. You could start it on March or July or whenever. Because if you follow the Bible reading plan in this particular journal, then when you're done with the entire journal, and you check off every time it tells you to read a specific portion, it gives you the option, when you're done checking it off, that means that you've read the whole entire Bible once, and you've read Psalms twice, and you have the option to read Proverbs an additional 10 times. Now, I had this sweet little lady write me something about the journals, which this has really nothing to do with our lesson, but I wanted you to see this. She wrote this and she said, good afternoon from my home in Kansas. I just wanted to tell you how much I'm enjoying and treasuring the Bible journal that you sent me. Wow, since August I have read Proverbs through one time. Now I'm reading it again. Jesus is showing me so many new things I'm learning, so many blessings. I'm in Leviticus now to read this book for myself, to take notes, to write down what to read in my Matthew Henry's commentary. And when I come across a word that I'm not sure of its meaning, to look it up, it's awesome. Each day I wake up and look forward to my time in prayer, then my devotion, then my Bible journal, and to share everything on my Facebook group. God is showing me so many new areas in my life to make better. In our family, hubby and I are going through some frustrations now. Starting my day each morning in what I just wrote, it has given me so much peace. Our marriage is getting stronger. The troubles that we're experiencing with our children who are all grown, I have peace that truly passes all understanding. Now, I wanted to read that because that actually makes me smile, because that's what I hope for when anyone reads the Bible. Because reading shouldn't be a chore. It should be something we look forward to, we're excited to learn something. What does God want to teach me? How can I read that he's so big that I can trust him? Now, the reason why I brought it up is because in this journal, like I said, there's an option to read Proverbs 10 additional times and Psalms twice. Now, Rob is my Proverbs guy. He loves Proverbs, so he would be the one reading Proverbs the 10 additional times. Me, on the other hand, I'm not that much of a fan of Proverbs. I kind of read through it once in my journal and then I'm all done. I don't do the 10 additional times. But here's what I do. I do read Psalms the additional time because I love Psalms. Because it shows like this whole gamut of life. It shows the ups and the downs that you and I struggle with every day. It shows in Psalms the times of sadness, depression. It shows times of happiness and when we just love God and worship him. And then it shows like everything in between because that is actually just really life. So before we get to this particular psalm, I want to kind of just tell you a little bit about Psalms as a whole because it's kind of fun to learn this. The book of Psalms is actually the longest book in the entire Bible. It has 150 chapters. It has the longest chapter, which is Psalms 119. It has 176 verses in just that one chapter. The shortest chapter in the Bible is also in Psalms, where it has 2 verses, Psalms 117. Most people think that King David wrote all the Psalms, but that isn't really true. There's at least 7 different authors who wrote all the Psalms. Out of the 150 Psalms, we know David wrote 73 of them that he actually said, this is from David. The sons of Korah wrote 12. Asaph, a choir director, wrote 12. Solomon wrote 2. Moses wrote 1. Heman wrote 1. Ethan wrote 1. And there's 48 other Psalms that have no authors attached to them at all. So David could have written it. Moses could have written it. Like, we really just actually don't know. So for the psalm we're going to read today, it doesn't have an author. We don't know who authored it, but Psalm 90, the psalm right before, was written by Moses. So this could be a continuation of what Moses was saying in Psalm 90, but since we don't have an actual name, we actually don't know. But whoever wrote this has some really encouraging words for us today. Verse 1 says this, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty." So let's break that down for just a minute. He who dwells, we'll start there. God is not saying, hey, he who just shows up whenever they're in trouble. Hey, whoever just calls on me when they need something. He's saying this promise is for those that dwell. And dwell means to reside or live in a specified place. In other words, I live under God's rule, God's umbrella, in my life is about him. That's what it means to dwell in his place. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is this: where do we dwell spiritually? And do we have a serious relationship with Jesus? Because if we do, then we'll be able to dwell where we're supposed to dwell. Do we continually dwell in his presence all through the day? Like, do we talk to him and converse with him throughout the day? Where do we go when trouble hits? Like, where do we go when we need strength? Where do we turn? Or is God like our neighbor? Like, oh, I ran out of eggs and I ran out of sugar, so I'm going to run over to my neighbor's, get what I need, and then go back to my own house. See, for this psalm to work for us, the first thing that we need to know is this: we have to be dwellers who are daily in his house, drawing on his strength. In other words, we have to be really serious about our relationship with God. He who dwells, lives in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Now, what does it mean to abide? To abide means to lodge, to live there. Chuck Swindoll says this about this verse: if we who know Jesus will dwell in conscious fellowship with him, walking in moment-by-moment dependence on him, we will enjoy the benefits of living under his protective care on those occasions when rest and lodging are needed. If we maintain our walk with him, we can count on him and his deliverance at times when the going gets rough. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Think of a shadow. A shadow is a place where you have to be really close to that person for them to be able to hide you in their shadow. When we feel anxious or fearful, we just kind of hide in his shadow. Here's what I love. Verse 2 says this, "And I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." It's all about learning that God can be trusted. God is our refuge. He's our shelter. He's our protection from danger or distress. God is our fortress. He's like a castle or a stronghold against our enemy. And then the psalmist says this, which I think is the key. He says, "My God in whom I trust." We trust him with our life. When we spend time under his shadow, when we dwell with him, then we trust him for whatever comes into our life. I'll give you an example from our home. Dusty, our son, just graduated from a 4-year university with a business degree. But now he wants to go to dental school and become a dentist. So he's back in school again. He's taking all of his prereqs, biology, chemistry. Classes he actually dropped his first 4 years because he's like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But to get into dental school, he not only has to take these classes, but he has to get really good grades in it, which means he studies like I've never seen. So he goes down to Rob's office, and there's a conference table down there with a whiteboard, and Dusty will just sit there and study all day long. So I went down there last week because I was doing something, and Dusty was in there studying. And he said, "Mom, I feel like I'm having an anxiety attack." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "I have this biology exam coming up." He goes, it's concepts like I've never even heard. He tells me about it and I laugh. I'm like, yeah, la, la, la. I don't even get it. But while he's studying, he's also doing an internship with a dentist out in Mesa. And so the dentist texts him and says, "Hey, were you able to get those, practice cases done?" But he hadn't, because he's been pouring all of his life into studying for this biology exam. So he texts them back and says, "I didn't have a chance to because I'm studying." Well, there's silence on the other end. So he is convinced now they're mad at him. They're not going to want him to work with them anymore. He can't concentrate. So I'm like, "Dusty, call the dentist. Explain that you love working for them, but school really does have to come first." I'm like, they're going to understand. So he calls them, talks to them, has the conversation, feels better, comes home that night for dinner, and he goes, "Mom, I'm so worried about this exam tomorrow." I say, "Dusty, let's talk about this shelter, under God's shelter and under his care. There's nothing to worry about. Play every one of those scenarios to the end. Let's say the dentist calls and says, 'We no longer want you working with us.' What's the worst that can happen? Now you have more time to study? Like, I don't know. Are you going to die because he says that? No. Let's say you go to take this biology exam. You know you've studied. So what happens if you get a 50 on your exam? What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, you don't get into dental school? Are you going to die?" Like, the answer is no, of course not. What if, Dusty, you have to work at McDonald's the rest of your life? Like, is that going to kill you? I don't know. Like, but then let's just go to the worst end. Let's say all of these things make you die. Well, guess what? We go to heaven. Like, I don't know. I think we win no matter what. In other words, I'm saying, Dusty, do your best. Study your hardest. But remember, you dwell in the shelter of the Most High. And that is where you will have peace, knowing that he's your refuge, he's your fortress, because God is for you. He's on your side. And you want to trust him for your future. You don't want to trust yourself. See, so often we're just like, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, and if I don't do this, then this isn't going to happen, and we're constantly focusing on ourselves, and we're trusting ourselves. And God's like, I don't want you to do that. I want you to work hard and come under my shelter. And when you do that, you're going to have a lot more peace. So I said, Dusty, when you're under God's shelter, this is kind of what it looks like. Trust him. Trust him. You study, and then trust God to bring to remembrance everything that you learned. Trust him to move on the dentist's heart in Mesa to understand you're really busy and to be okay with you. Trust him to move you where you need to be in life. In other words, he is our first line of defense, not our last resort. See, so often we make God our last resort. Well, that didn't happen. I couldn't do that. And now I think I'll just turn to God. He doesn't want that. He wants us to come under this shelter and let him take care of us so that we can trust him. That's what it looks like to walk through life. All of us have different scenarios with that. But I want to walk in the shadow of the Almighty. And when we can look at life that way, we actually have less anxiety and more peace. And like I said, that's just Dusty's issue. But you have your own things. And the problem is people want to do it themselves. So I have to make myself better, so I take pills, or I drink too much, or I eat too much to cope. God says, no, you don't need to do that. You need to dwell in my presence. Dwell in my presence. And know I am right there by your side. Remember that shadow, you're very, very close. He's very close to you. He's like, I want you to depend on me. I want you to trust me. I want you to talk to me. It's that kind of a relationship. And for me, as weird as it sounds, the older I get, the less I worry. And I think it's because I really understand what this dwelling in his shelter means. It's like this, I'm going to read this from a soldier. And I love this because he has this really, really great perspective on dwelling in the presence of God. Because when we dwell in God's presence, we can go through anything. And we're not saying that nothing bad will ever happen to you in his presence, but what I do know is that when we're living in that shadow of the Almighty and we're trusting him and we know, then it doesn't matter what happens because we know he's going to get us through it. Here's what B.J. Morbitzer writes. He says, I am a soldier in the army of God. The Lord Jesus Christ is my commanding officer. The Bible is my code of conduct. Faith, prayer, and the word are my weapons of warfare. I have been taught by the Holy Spirit, trained by experience, tried by adversity, and tested by fire. I'm a volunteer in this army, and I am enlisted for eternity. I will either retire in this army at the rapture or die in this army, but I will not get out, sell out, be talked out, or pushed out. I'm faithful, reliable, capable, and dependable. If my God needs me, I'm there. If he needs me in Sunday school to teach the children, work with the youth, help adults, or just sit and learn, he can use me because I am there. I am a soldier. I am not a baby. I do not need to be pampered, petted, primed up, pumped up, picked up, or pepped up. I am a soldier. No one has to call me, remind me, write me, visit me, entice me, or lure me because I am a soldier. I am not a wimp. I am in a place saluting my king, obeying his orders, praising his name, and building his kingdom. No one has to send me flowers, gifts, food, cards, candy, or give me handouts. I do not need to be cuddled, cradled, cared for, or catered to. I am committed. I cannot have my feelings hurt bad enough to turn me around. I cannot be discouraged enough to turn me aside. I cannot lose enough to cause me to quit. When Jesus called me into this army, I had nothing. If I end up with nothing, I will still come out ahead. I will win. See, I love that because when he's talking about in the shelter of God, in the shadow, this is how we think. We win no matter what. Life is going to throw us bad things, but you know what? Under his shelter, we're trusting him to use it, to do something with it. We're not going to run away because bad things happen to us. He says this, he says, my God has and will continue to supply all my need. I am more than a conqueror. I will always triumph. I can do all things through Christ. The devil cannot defeat me. People cannot delusion me. Weather cannot weary me. Sickness cannot stop me. Battles cannot beat me. Money cannot buy me. Governments cannot silence me. And hell cannot handle me. I am a soldier, and even death cannot destroy me. For when my commander calls me from the battlefield, he will promote me to captain and then allow me to rule with him. I am a soldier in the army, and I'm marching, claiming victory. I will not give up. I will not run around. I am a soldier marching heaven bound. I love that because it's like the soldier understands what it means to dwell. It means that, like I said, it doesn't mean things are going to always go our way, but we know the end game is heaven. And the in-between time on this earth, we can dwell peacefully in the shelter of the Most High because no matter how things turn out, we know him and we trust him because he's our refuge and he's our fortress. Psalm 91, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Verse 2, I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And then the end of this psalm says this, verse 14, because he has loved me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him securely on high because he has known my name. See, whether in this life or the life to come, we will be delivered. That's the best news. Whether we die or whether we live, we will be delivered and we spend eternity with him. Verse 15 says this, he will call upon me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. So he doesn't say that there's not going to be trouble. And I will rescue him and honor him. With a long life, I will satisfy him and let him see my salvation. That salvation is after we die. So today I just want to encourage you. I want to encourage you with encouraging truth number 36, that God is your shelter. And if you don't feel like he is today, then make that happen today. Make today the day that you get underneath his shelter and start doing what Chuck Swindoll says, walking in moment by moment dependence on him and enjoying the benefits of living under his protective care. Hopefully that encourages you. Have a really good week.